All right, and we are back. It's the Cynic with Sir Sam once again. So we are doing something a tiny bit different today. Andrew Tate has been all over the news lately, and I'm gonna be honest, I couldn't have told you who this guy was like at all a few months ago. With my job, I work some with like school students and all, and I had a freshman in high school, I think it was, asking me what I thought about Andrew Tate. And my reaction was like, who? What? My wife was telling me that was encouraging me to do sort of a response to what he's been saying on things. Sir Sam, any like background info you're bringing here, or thoughts on this?
Sure. I have a little bit more familiarity with Andrew Tate than with what you're coming at. And the max of my familiarity is just basically seeing reels of things he has said on YouTube. Never have I actually watched a full video of him in this kind of context. So I'm a little bit aware of some of the things he has said, both good and bad, and it'll be interesting to see what kind of stuff that he says in this video.
So here we go.
I understand what you're saying. I understand what you're saying,
I've
but
had
the idea that this 1% of men have created this terrible society. Yeah, I talk about that. I talk about the Matrix. I talk about these things, but it's always been this way. It's always been a small elite group of men who are in charge of the world. And unfortunately, now we're fighting battles in different ways. The days of old, a man proved his worth by going to war. Basically, every man at any point in his life was going to end up going to war, and he came back victorious. He came back with honor. He got himself a wife. That's how it worked, right? Now men don't have to go to war as much, depending on where you live in the world, and it's slightly different. And we fight our wars in other ways. And one of the true expressions of testosterone and trying to really express your ability and your combative ability now in the modern world is power and influence. So in the olden days, you'd go to war, you come back with a ribbon. Nowadays, you got X amount of followers, you can move the world with money. I can bend reality with money. Please understand,
It's
if I
true.
walk into Jimmy Choo, they lock the door. No brokies allowed in. Tate's here. And I buy whatever the fuck I want. There's lines outside because I'm there. I bend the world with money. That's how the wars are now won. So you're talking about high status males, and it's always been that way. Now you have a whole contingent of men who aren't dead. Okay, they didn't die in a ditch, but they're lonely as off, and that's the reality of it. And women don't give a fuck about them. And why should you? I'm not sitting here actually on women in any way. I think women have a biological instinct to a degree to try and find the best mate they can because it gives them the highest chance of survival in the harsh realities of the world. And if they look at a man who's not capable, they just don't feel an attraction to him. And that's the bottom line of it. And that's what
I was just wondering what, especially from a historical perspective,
Hmm.
how would you evaluate his claim about, men proving their worth by going to war and engaging in combat and
Um, I would say, oh my goodness, that's interesting. There is, how do I put it? It sounds good on the surface because there's obviously a core, rather large kernel of truth there, but it's
mhm,
also overly simplistic. If we think back to a biblical perspective here, men and women, yeah, are fundamentally different, created to fulfill fundamentally complementary but very different roles. They shouldn't be usurping each other's roles. If you think back to Adam, he's created to conquer the world by turning it into a work of art, right? They're supposed to go
mhm,
out and
mhm,
cultivate the world, make it beautiful. So men are in a biblical anthropology created with the goal to go out and have a constructive project. So you see
mhm.
that, you put a guy in a cubicle for 20 years without a family, he's a single guy, he might save money and have some toys on the side, but he's a miserable guy, right? God made us to go forth and conquer in the sense of having the project, right? So that
Mhm.
project might be being a scientist and helping us better understand the world, because through understanding the world, we understand how God created the world. We glorify God. We might serve in a military and help protect our nation, which, once again, bravery and courage in a godly direction is bringing glory to God. But he is oversimplifying. And even in a historical context, I mean, my goodness, you look at any time in history, it's an oversimplification to try and say that all of human past is just constant warfare and barbarism. You zero in at any time, and even during times of large scale warfare, I mean, you're not talking every single day people go out and fight. They go out for few months, right? There's, they have to keep the farms going back home or else they all
Mhm.
starve. You look at some of the great heroes of even the ancient world and such. I mean, Confucius, one of the great names of Chinese history, wasn't a warrior,
Right, right.
you see this a lot. You see some of the great rulers of the past that weren't necessarily great conquerors. Tons of philosophers, statesmen. A lot of the great names of medieval history were monks.
Mhm, yeah, right,
Never
right.
fought anyone.
Yeah, and I think that's really helpful because it kind of puts a helpful corrective on what Tate is saying, because he's essentially making like the claim that throughout history men needed to show their worth by having power. And that's what he's saying, like, about himself and having money. Like, he has power, and men need to go out and express and demonstrate and manifest power. And his claim, which is primarily through violence and
Hmm.
warfare. Tate is ultimately mistaken in saying that men need to manifest and demonstrate power. What men need to manifest and demonstrate is purpose.
Hmm.
That, as you were saying, it's like men can go out to war, sure, but they also need to come back and do the farming, and they also need to protect their families and do whatever the mundane day-to-day grind requires of them in the context of an overall vision and purpose for their life and family.
Hmm.
And I think that shows also a great fault in what he was saying about, like, the money kind of deal, where it's like, I assume it was some kind of, like, restaurant or some place that he
Yeah.
goes into and the doors closed. It's like, okay, well, what purpose does that have other than your pride and self-exaltation?
Yeah.
Uh, Going to war to protect your family is both an expression of power and purpose. Like, there can be a heavy overlap between power and purpose, but there can still be expressions of power that are purposeless, and we call that vainglory and pride and self-exaltation.
There's actually this is interesting on this topic. There's actually I feel like he's got a misunderstanding about economics going on here. The zero sum fallacy, where in society, oh, the rich people have to have gotten rich by making someone else be poorer. And instead of you saying, well, no, no, the world doesn't work that way. A lot of people got rich by finding a service that helped poor people, that they were
Right,
willing to
right,
pay for
right.
because it made their lives better. And you were
Yeah,
just
yeah.
so good at making other people's lives better, they gave you so much money, you got rich as a result. It's not a
Right.
zero sum game. Tate is coming at human society as though, oh, I get power, which means I get to lord it over you because I got that power by taking it from you. And,
Mhm.
and don't get me wrong, there's a place for that. If there's someone breaking into my house trying to harm my family, yeah, if I need to fight that person, hopefully I win and that person loses very badly. But I'm not saying there aren't places to think in that framework. But there's also an element to which, from a Christian perspective, our job is to conquer in terms of go out and glorify God. That means telling others about the Lord. That means in our work, be like Daniel, be a person who brings glory to God. He's serving in Babylon, but still brings glory to God in how he did everything with his whole heart. If Christians go into the art, the Christian movies shouldn't be a joke. They should actually be high quality because we put hard work into it. When Christian scientists do science, it shouldn't be, they should be well known as great scientists because they're doing it for the glory of God. We have a stronger mandate than Tate has to go out and
Mm,
be
mhm.
go-getters in terms of working hard for God's
Mhm.
glory, but it's
Mhm.
not a zero-sum game of I'm going around trying to make sure I beat everyone down so I'm better. It is going out to try and be a go-getter for God in the sense of bring glory to God.
I think it's the lack of that narrative, meta narrative, and that driving purpose for God's glory that is the main reason for why he brought up, like, how so many men today are weak and
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
addicted to porn and essentially wasting their lives. And he attributes that to the fact that there's no war, like there's
Yeah.
no way to like go, like, be forced to prove your manliness. But as you said, also, that's like an oversimplification. There's so many different variables that contribute to this. Certainly, being thrust into violent conflict force boys to turn into men.
Definitely.
But there are also very pervasive ideologies such as feminism or critical theory or Marxism, as as was demonstrated in this very video, that all contribute to the feminization of men, not just the lack of an actual like conflict and violence in their lives.
Yeah.
So that's where I think Tate oversimplifies and misses out on the other variables that are going on. And I mean, at bottom, it's sin, and
Yeah.
he doesn't have an operating category for sin, at least in a true biblical sense.
Yeah. And would you agree with maybe the idea that, like, he throws out there, it's like, oh, sending off young men to war that would turn them into men. You know, would you agree with maybe saying that, like, that is a thing, because part of being a godly man is wanting to fight on behalf of God. And I'm not talking just physically, I'm just saying it's that mindset. It's that willingness to go out and work for the cause, sacrifice yourself, put yourself last. But just being willing to go and fight in a physical war isn't the total thing. That's a thing that will help you be willing to go and sacrifice and do the right things to be a man, be stronger, put yourself last. But to a certain extent, it's like he's giving too low a bar here. You know,
Yeah, yeah, I would definitely agree with that because you see, men who do go and serve in the military that don't have Christ, and they serve in extreme ways and live out the kind of violence and conflict that Tate is saying is it's necessary for men to go through that to show their worth and power, and they come back. Jerks,
yeah,
or you get into the whole issue of like PTSD and how that like historically developed um and all of that. But as we've been saying, it's very much an oversimplification to say war made men throughout history. Now there's no more war, at least as pervasively. Therefore, there's no more men. And since there's no war, you need to show your power in other ways that move the world, as he was saying, and that's done through money and making money and things like that. And I think we are just as justified in saying that money does not make a man, and neither does war make a man.
hmm
So.